Hey, Thoughts in the Crossfire, Andy here. Michael Stevens is often referred to as Vsauce by his audience, but he also refers to his audience as Vsauce. He doesn't say, welcome to Vsauce, or hey, Vsauce here. He says, hey Vsauce, Michael here. So, which is it? Are we Vsauce? Is he Vsauce? Or is it something else entirely? Let's talk about abortion and veganism. Abortion is one of the most controversial topics maybe of all time, certainly of the current time, and veganism is similarly controversial, though it's not talked about quite as much. Though the amount that veganism is being talked about is rising, especially because environmental concerns are becoming increasingly pressing, and people are like, oh, veganism is a good way to stop climate change, so let's look into that. So, more interest is being shown in veganism over time, but it's certainly much smaller of a topic in terms of how many people are spending how much time talking about it compared to abortion. What I want to address in this video is something that I've noticed when talking to a lot of vegans and some people who are against veganism, though not as much of that, and a lot of people who are on either side of the abortion debate, and the fact that there's actually a very similar logic to become pro-life as there is to become vegan, but those positions are quite separate from each other, and if you find someone and they're pro-life, they're probably not vegan, and if they're vegan, they're probably not pro-life. Partially because if they're pro-life, they're probably on the right, and if they're vegan, they're probably on the left. But the logic to get to either of those positions seems to be very similar. It seems to me that both of these positions kind of come out of an attempt to rationalize or rigorize the idea that life is valuable. So on one side, you say life is valuable, therefore unborn life is also valuable. And on the other side, you say life is valuable, therefore non-human life is also valuable. What's interesting to me is that there's very few people who go both ways on this. There's very few people who say both that non-human life is valuable and that unborn human life is valuable. And there's even fewer, if any, that say that unborn non-human life is valuable. So you have those four options. Everybody agrees on the first one, that born human life is valuable, right? And then some people say that unborn human life is also valuable, and some people say that born animal life is also valuable, or born non-human life. But there's almost nobody who says that unborn non-human life is valuable. But what's interesting to me is that the way that you get to those places through that rationality seems to be the idea of defining life and trying to define it rigorously, and the definitions that each side come up with seem to be very similar. They just don't want to apply it to the other side. So I'll give you an example of a pro-life position, and I want to make it clear, I'm not saying that all pro-life positions are this, but this is one pro-life example that will illustrate my point, and it's the idea of the heartbeat being the thing that makes the unborn child valuable. So you say, once it has a heartbeat, you can't kill it. It's immoral to kill it once it has a heartbeat. It could even be immoral to kill it before the heartbeat, but by the heartbeat, it's definitely immoral to end that life. Okay, so if it's the heartbeat that we're defining the life with, right, because remember our original assumption was that life is valuable, and this as far as I can tell, these two things on the side of veganism and pro-life are attempts to rigorize the idea that life is valuable, right? And so if we say the heartbeat is what matters, then of course that would apply to other animals that have heartbeats. So what's the difference there? Well, there's an obvious difference that this is human. This has the potential to be a human, but if you try to use potential, you run into quite a few problems that I discussed last week. Or it's really just one problem, but it's a pretty big problem. And so I don't know if potential is your best bet for making this really rigorous. So what else is there? Well, the problem is that a fetus, or anything before a newborn, is not as intelligent, it's not as developed as a cow or a pig. It probably is more developed than a chicken, okay? But pigs are actually incredibly intelligent. They're one of the most intelligent animals on Earth, actually. And cows, not quite as much, but still, cows are more intelligent and they have more developed sentience than a fetus. That's a pretty reasonable assumption to make. So, how do you differentiate that? I'm not sure. So there seems to be some inconsistency there. Now, that is basing it off of the heartbeat. And maybe you're pro-life and you don't base it off of the heartbeat. That's cool. But what I see is that that kind of pattern ensues a lot, where there's some sort of definition that actually would probably apply to animals in some way, but you just kind of throw your hands up and say, but it doesn't apply to animals for some reason. So on the other hand, you have veganism. And I should clarify, I'm not talking broadly about veganism because that's a diet and you could be on that for any number of reasons, health, environmental, or ethical. I'm talking about those ethical reasons, so really animal rights, but I'm just going to call it veganism. Anyway, for veganism, you have the idea that animals are valuable, that animal lives are valuable, and that's normally based on the idea of sentience, that sentience is valuable, right? And if sentience is valuable, there's a lot of evidence that backs up the idea that animals are sentient just as humans are, maybe to lesser degrees as you go farther and farther away from humans, but they are sentient, a lot of them. And so the idea emerges that, well, maybe they're worth something, they have moral value. The thing is that an unborn child will also have that moral value. Okay, think about this. Insects, like bees, okay, bees are animals. They're kind of very far away from us, they're insects, but they are still animals, and so if it's wrong to kill a bee, then it's probably wrong to kill an unborn human going very, very far back into the pregnancy. Yet, you see most vegans are pro-choice. So, it's kind of interesting. I realize that there are other reasons to be vegan and there are other reasons to be pro-life than the ones that I've mentioned, but this is a theme, the kind of pattern that I just demonstrated, that is a theme that I see in lots and lots of different reasons for being pro-life and being vegan, is that the reason for one normally should also make you the other, but it just seems to never do that. Andy from the future here. I just want to interject for a second because I do have an idea about why vegans will tend to be pro-choice, and it's because vegans are high in empathy, okay, and this is also the case for progressives, liberals, leftists type people, which I know those are three different things, but they overlap so much, especially in the US, they might as well be the same group of people, and that's where you find the majority of vegans. But vegans especially within that group will have a lot of empathy because if people become vegan for ethical reasons, that's usually because they are able to empathize with the plight of the animals. And when it comes to abortion, empathy will tell you to be pro-choice because you can empathize with the woman, but you really can't empathize with a child. And if you can empathize with a child, it's certainly a lot less than you can with the woman. You can always empathize with the woman more, even after the child is born, even after the whole question of abortion is over, even if the child is born, nobody knows what it's like to be a baby, and you might not know what it's like to be a woman if you're not a woman, but at least women can kind of tell you something, right? But a baby can't tell you how it feels, and nobody knows what it's like to be a baby because none of us remember, right? So even when it's a baby, you can't empathize with it as much as you can with the woman, and certainly when you can't see it, or hear it, or detect it in really any way other than just kind of knowing peripherally that it's there, it's really hard to empathize with that. And it is easy to empathize with the woman who might be caused some sort of inconvenience, so you get a pro-life position when you have a high empathy. However, on the other hand, why are conservatives not vegan? I mean, I think there's a complex answer to that. It's kind of really obvious. You know, I feel like it's a really obvious answer, but to try to put it into words shortly, I don't know if that's super easy. But I'll keep talking about it, but that's where I'm going to end this little interjection. So anyway, there you go, abortion and veganism. This has been Thoughts in the Crossfire. Thank you for watching. Please discuss in the comments below. If you have any disagreements with me, I'd love to hear it, love to discuss with you. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye.